All right. So, according to the YouTube studio here, we are now live, and I see myself talking with you guys and hearing that. So, we do not yet have Fig Cam set up. So I thought I would just show off my little week long. We've had him for a week and a day now. This is Fig. If you guys didn't see him last week, I'm totally exploiting my little child actor here and showing you my little dog Figgy. This is our little mix of a poodle, and we don't know what else is in here, but we have been absolutely loving having this guy around, and so I just wanted to show him off to you again. Here you go. Mel's gonna take him now, and we're gonna do our show. So welcome to Critical Q&A number 531. Let's flip over to the host and chat screen here. And here we are. Okay, that's right. It's Sunday live in Denver. Hope you all are ready for a couple hour power here as we dive into some amazing facts and opinions. And my wife, for Valentine's Day this year, my wife got me the most appropriate gift ever. This is my soapbox that I get to soapbox on with my bullhorn. This is my little soapbox. So whenever I'm going to put this right here. And so if I'm going to try to remember that if I start soapboxing, I will pick up my little bullhorn here. So you know that's what I'm doing. Because I never, ever soapbox here. All right, let's flip over to get the Q&A portion of this going. Please put your questions here. And I understand from Love Food Kitchen that the French documentary on Scientology is airing right now. So perfect timing for everything, of course. I know Alex was also live a few minutes ago interviewing Amir. And I know in a couple of hours we'll probably have now make sure, okay, Mark turned. If you want to ask me anything at all, I've thrown up a Q&A box so that you can, in the comment box, there should be a section for you to put your questions in there. And if you throw them in there, I can then throw them up on the screen and answer them. It's a lot harder for me to answer them from the regular comments. That's how we do things here, so that I can throw your questions up on the screen as I answer them. It's a little formatting thing that we do here, and it helps me to organize for the future so people know, you know, what question I'm answering when they show up on the show. I wanted to let you guys know I finally downloaded the video on the Grant Cardone interview from Vlad TV. And I have met a real technical challenge in still this last week, like 4 different efforts to try to duplicate or screen grab the Sarge Foth video interview that Lawrence Wright did from Tony's site. It's not on YouTube or anywhere else. I kind of have to do a little technical stuff to grab that. And it's just time consuming because it's an audio sync issue. I can record it, but the audio goes more and more and more out of sync, so it becomes useless within about 10 or 15 minutes. So I'm debugging that. Probably an easy debug if I use a different browser or something, but I'm trying to debug that so that I can do those reaction videos. But I've got the Grant Cardone full interview. It's an hour and a half long, and I need to watch it. I understand there's only one little section in there where he talks about Xenu or has some kind of defensive reaction about that. But I'm a little curious what else Grant Cardone is pimping these days. So I thought I'd watch the whole thing and then give you guys a rundown or do a reaction video on that hopefully this next week. And as far as any other updates, the book is still in editing mode, and we are working now. I've got some homework to do from my publishing person to get the back matter, the back cover story written, and the about the author stuff written, and the acknowledgement section written. All the little stuff has to get done while the editing process gets finished. On that. So that is still an ongoing thing, and it's out of my hands. So I'm just waiting to hear back on what's happening with that. And finally, I wanted to talk about something today. You guys know that I like to do a little monologue sometimes before I start answering your questions. And I thought today this might be, useful, appropriate, interesting, whatever. And I kind of, instead of trying to teleprompt it to you, I'm just going to put it here. Well, I'm just going to read to you from this because I wrote it down and made these notes here and stuff. But this has to do with you and me and current events, my euphemism for, our political nightmare, and discussions, talking about it. Because you're going to find, shockingly enough, you're going to find people who are going to tell you that you don't have the right to talk about certain things. You're not qualified to talk about certain things. You don't have the rank to ask about Shelly. You don't have the credentials to ask or discuss or have an opinion about this topic or area or whatever subject under discussion. And I, don't particularly like it when people use language or arguments like that to shut down discussion, right? Or free speech. Because you are not qualified. Now, if someone were to suggest that I was not qualified, or you as a lay person were not qualified to go give a speech on quantum physics at Stanford, okay, fair enough, right? But to not be able to express an opinion or have a discussion about something that affects all of us in the general population because you somehow, according to, Bozo, don't have the credentials, right? I wanted to address this. So like I said, I wrote some notes here. So this is probably a little bit more better put than me going off the top of my head. So let me just give it to you. When ideas move from private belief into public power, they become open to public discussion. That's just how a free society works. There's an important distinction between personal faith and public influence. Personal faith is private. It's protected. People can believe whatever they want about God, salvation, prophecy, or the end of the world. And I should have, of course, mentioned that this is in reference to the podcast that I posted with Clint Haycock this Saturday. We talked about MAGA evangelical Christians and what they believe and what they think and where they're coming from on all of this stuff. And some people get really offended when you call them out for what they're doing. They really don't like that. But when religious beliefs seek to shape public law, government policy, education, or social structure, those beliefs enter the public sphere. And once something enters the public sphere, everyone gets to examine it, question it, analyze it, and criticize it. That's not hostility, that's democracy. And it's one of the reasons people hate democracy so much. The very idea of politics comes from the Greek word polis, meaning the shared life of a community. How people organize power, law, and social order together. Thinkers like Aristotle described politics as the study of how societies govern themselves and pursue a common life. And if something is trying to shape that common life, whether it's an economic theory, a political ideology, or a religious movement, it becomes part of public conversation by definition. In a free society, you don't need permission or special credentials to discuss ideas that affect everyone. Public influence invites public scrutiny. That's how accountability works. That's how societies avoid concentrating power without question. Something we are very much struggling with right now. And this applies equally to any movement, religious or secular, that seeks to influence government, culture, or public policy. The question isn't who is allowed to talk. The question is whether ideas hold up under examination. Arguments should stand or fall on evidence, reasoning, and their real-world effects, not on claims of authority or who is allowed to question them. Because if only insiders can criticize a movement, then accountability disappears. And when accountability disappears, power goes unchecked. So here on my channel, the goal is simple. Examine ideas that shape society, understand their influence, and talk about their consequences openly. Okay, so wanted to share some of those thoughts with y'all because I think it's important that we embrace, understand, and openly describe our rights and freedoms and what we can do with them when other people try to challenge our use of them and tell us we don't have those rights, we don't have those freedoms, and we should just shut up and sit down and just take the abuse. And I disagree. I could not disagree harder, in fact, with anything more than, when I get that sort of nonsense back at me. So I thought you guys might agree, and I thought I might share some thoughts about that. Okay, so now that I have done that, I'll put my bullhorn away, and we can get to your questions now. Just check in here. That's right. Gatekeeping, exactly right. Okay, good. So I see we have some questions coming in, so let's go ahead and start taking them up. First one, X-Cyan. What can you say about conversion therapy? Did Scientology believe in it? No, Scientology doesn't believe in anything but Scientology. So in terms of any workable anything out there, it is only Scientology. Anything that Scientologists look at in the real world that is manipulative or transformational or, supposed to be inducing change of some kind in a person, Scientologists think that Scientology is the only thing that can create permanent, lasting, positive change. Everything else is a joke or is a temporary thing or is packed with unintended consequences, destructive stuff that's going to bite you in the butt or whatever. So it might look or sound great now, like, meditation or crystals or doing some other practice might be, might look good in the moment or something, maybe, right? But no, we're not, Scientologists aren't down with that. It's only Scientology that you can utilize. Now, as far as what can I say about conversion therapy, I can say that it is a form of thought reform or thought control, using methods or techniques that are often physically brutal. There are often efforts at, well, how do you go about getting someone to change their gender identity? How do you get someone to change who they conceive of themselves as? You create a condition and situation where you condition a person to believe that who they conceive themselves to be is wrong, is morally, socially, religiously, because that's often where it comes from, right? Religion, or ideologically, wrong. It's an error. You should not be who you are. Pretty basic to a human being, right? Since most of the beginning decades of our lives are spent struggling with and figuring out the answer to the question, who am I? As a standard, regular experience of a human being, any culture, anywhere, anytime. Who am I? What is my role here? You find yourself born into a world. You are surrounded by people. These people have influence and power over you. You grow up, i.e. your parents, right? Your family. You start bringing other authority figures into this, all of them telling you things and shaping and molding you in their image or their idea of who you should be. And you yourself are driven by whatever impulses and ideas and attitudes and feelings and needs that you have. And out of this mix of forces, social, psychological, personality forces, you emerge, right? You figure out who the hell you are. And then someone comes along for whatever reason and tells you, nope, you're wrong. You figured it out wrong. In fact, you figured it out so wrong, God hates you. God thinks you're an abomination, a travesty, an error, a mistake, a sin against humanity. That is what you are, according to people who engage in conversion therapy of any kind. At any level, the basic assumption and premise is you're wrong for thinking you are who you are. You're wrong. And our job as the conversion therapists is to convince you how wrong you are so that you will change at a fundamental level who you are. That's the challenge. How do you get somebody to tell you that they no longer are who they believe they are? You can beat on them. You can torture them. You could make them, force them through conditioning and stress and social obligation and blackmail and gaslighting and sleep deprivation and food deprivation and hypnotic induction through trance induction, through repeating the same things over and over and over again, whether they're Bible tracts or whether they are some other sayings or statements or affirmations that you must continue to repeat because Jesus hates you and you need to repent for your sinful ways, right? This kind of approach. And all the methods of thought reform that Robert Lifton lays out in the book, The Psychology of, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, are applied to people in these conversion therapy situations. And yes, they do get beaten on in some cases too. And this is done through religious indoctrination, mostly by unlicensed practitioners, because in many states, licensed practitioners are forbidden by law and statute statewide from engaging in this behavior. But unlicensed, unregulated counselors and consultants and pastors can engage in this activity legally and do. And so we see these practices being carried out in many, many states in this country. And conversion therapy is a form of thought reform, which is a form of torture, right? It's coercive control. It's an effort to tell somebody that they aren't who they are. So that's kind of what I think about it. I think it's disgusting. I think it's an abomination against, common sense and human rights that people are put through these kind of torturous experiences. You would not deconvert or deal with a Nazi that way. Why would you deal with somebody who's gay that way? It's not effective. You can torture somebody to tell you anything. You can break a person spiritually, let's say. Let's just use that word. Psychologically. You can break them. You can break, what that means is you can break their resistance. Their will and urge to resist your efforts is now been proven to them to be useless. And they have no method or way of fighting back against you. That's what it is to break someone. You've canceled or nullified their resiliency. Congratulations, right? When somebody or some group of people does that to another person, and thinks that they are winning and succeeding in their efforts, right? These are grossly misinformed people, right? Just horribly so. And it's adjacent to, real evil, real just nasty stuff. And of course, this comes out of a world where children are taught very early on that they are there to be broken, that you deal with children by breaking their spirit and then molding them into what you want them to be. This is James Dobson. This is old stuff. This is decades old thinking in the Christian evangelical world where conversion therapy thrives. This attitude is very, very baked into the culture, that children are not little human beings to be raised with common sense and reason and love and compassion. They are to be broken like animals. There are books on this. There are videos on this. We've shown them on this channel. I ain't making anything up here. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands, dare I say millions of people in the United States alone who absolutely believe as parents that this is the way to deal with their children. That this is the only way to deal with their children, to break them like you would a donkey. This is the books that they read, right? By the Pearls. Michael and Debbie Pearl, for example, have written whole books on this. Bill Gothard loved this. The Duggars love this. They love this idea of breaking children, right? So you can mold them into God's little soldiers. And all of this is the same world from which comes conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is the corrective action that's taken when all this conditioning doesn't work. You do all this, you break this child, and they won't break. So you got to break them harder, see? At the end of the day, that's what that is. And I, as you can tell, have no tolerance or understanding for it at all. It's inhuman. Okay, so there you go on conversion therapies. It's going to get it with both barrels on that one because I have a lot of emotional attitudes about that one too, Okay. Benson Shelton, what happened to Benson? Benson ran off about 3 months ago or so, and 3 or 4 months, and he's gone. And so we have not seen or heard from him. We did everything, and I do mean everything you could do to try to track him down, find him, encourage other people to help us in that effort, pursued leads to find him, etc., and nothing really worked out. And so little Benson's out there. Hopefully, we like to believe that Benson is being taken care of by somebody else, but we have no idea. He just got out of the fence one day and took off because he's an independent spirit. That is definitely what Benson is. So there you go. That's the story on that one. Okay, Nightlife 449. Why do you need to tell us your answers or thinking if we need to function on our own? Who said you need to function on your own? That's an interesting point. Implies that nobody needs anybody, or we shouldn't be taking advice from other people, or we shouldn't listen to other people, or other people can't help other people because we should be operating on our own. It's an odd way of thinking, is the first thought that occurs to me in addressing this question. I don't need the other thing that comes up to me in answering this is I don't need to answer your questions, but I like to. I like to talk. I like to share my ideas, and I like the fact that people want to hear them. So that's the reason. That's the need I'm fulfilling here. But I don't need to do this. I could spend my Sunday afternoons easily doing other things. But I think that we get along better when we learn from each other. And I think that community and stability are bedrock foundations of togetherness, of working, hand in hand, of working cooperatively. And I think that's why I do what I do here, and that's all I'm trying to do. So yeah, interesting question. Okay, Ms. Tara Green, have you tried using FFmpeg to download that interview you wanted? If I had a URL link to that video, then I would. Otherwise, I can't. I have to screen grab it. And on the case of the Lawrence Wright interview with Sarge, it's embedded in Tony's Substack, and so there is no linking to it or getting it any other way. So that's what I'm trying to do. But normally I do use FFmpeg to download and convert at the same time. I've got this little Linux command to do that so that I can get it into the format that I need, because I need it in to get all technical for a second, since you asked, I need my videos in PCM16 audio, not AAC, because DaVinci Resolve in Linux doesn't deal with AAC. I had to learn ridiculous amounts of technical nonsense to be able to even say that sentence out loud. I'm very, very, very far from any kind of tech nerd, I don't think. But I am becoming one to debug Linux. It's fun. It's fun though. As long as you just give yourself patience and time, not like, if I'm freaking out about it, something, then that never works and I can never debug it. Xcion asks, what OS do you have on your phone? Android. I have an Android phone. Have you considered using Graphene OS or a Linux-based system like Ubuntu Touch? Not on my phone. I've looked some stuff up to see about Linux on a phone or something like that. But with the various processors and phone systems and the fact I'd have to jailbreak it or kind of root it or something in order to do that, I was like, nah. My efforts are to get off Google and get off Gmail, which I have now done. I'm now using Proton Mail, and get off Windows, which I've now done. I don't have Windows systems running any of this anymore. So all that AI, Windows, Copilot crap is just kind of out of my life now, which I love. And I have access to all kinds of fun free stuff with Linux. The cost is more time and more understanding of your computers in order to make it work. But I didn't want to mess with my phones or tablets. I found out that Linux isn't so hot at that because of the processors, as I understand it, especially with the tablets. So they're going to stay Android-based systems for now. And there's no need for me to mess with my phones or tablets too much for what I'm trying to do. So haven't seen a need to go there. All right, Ms. Tara Green, ETA for my book. We are gunning for the end of this month to get a publication date to publish and get it out there on Amazon and maybe some other platforms as a print on demand and ebook, and then follow up with the audiobook if I can't get that audiobook published at the same time. But the goal is end of this month. Okay. Pine Grin, if you could talk with Shelly Miscavige, what will you talk with her about? Huh. Oh, that's a good question. Okay, let me think about that for a second. if I could legit have a conversation with Shelly Miscavige, go sit down somewhere and actually talk to her, the first thing I'd try to do is maybe figure out why she's staying there. That would be the first thing I actually personally on a one-on-one with her want to know. What, if I were interviewing her on video or something, it may be a different conversation. I don't know, but I don't know. I'd want to find out, I'd want to take a shot at cracking that, right? Like what's keeping you here? Why are you staying here? Just kind of on a human level, right? Just deal with that first. If I couldn't get anywhere with that, I might, if it was a data collect, like, okay, I'm going to now ask you questions and just get information from you. There are many, many, many things I would want to know from her. I would ask her about David Miscavige assuming power, what that meant to him, what that time period was like, that epiphanal moment where he says, I hope we're not getting any little audio or video skips here. I'm seeing a couple little blinks out of the corner of my eye. If that's happening, sometimes there's a little faulty connection that happens sometimes. Anyway, going back to this question, I would ask her about the whole time period when David Miscavige had this epiphany that power is assumed. What did he mean by that? Because I think I understand what he meant by that, but what does she think, right? What did he say? What else is there to that? Because that was a pivotal moment in David Miscavige deciding to take the control of Scientology, as I understand it. I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to know more about how he ticks. I'd like to know what it is that makes him laugh. I'd like to know what it is that makes him cry. I'd like to know about him as a human being. I'd like to know about her as a human being. What makes her tick? What keeps her motivated to stay there? What is her mission? What are her needs? What is it that she's fulfilling and staying there? Why does she put up with being away from her husband for 20 years now? What's up with that? What's her attitude about that? I'd have so many questions just at a human level and, sort of relationship level between her and David Miscavige. Then if I could get all that, then I'd want to ask her, oh my God, so many things about the 80s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and today, right? The phrase comes from a radio station. But I'd want to know all about it. I'd want to know all about her life, all about the things she's seen, the things she's heard, the things she's taken part in. What has she done? What decisions did she have something to do with? What influences did she have over David Miscavige over the years? And other people. What about Marty Rathbun? What the hell with that? What the hell is up with Dave and Marty, right? What's that relationship? What about these other people? What about his inner circle? How did he develop this? What was he thinking when he took on the IRS, Miscavige, and when he won? What did he think? What was going on in his mind as to how he pulled that off and what he thought about himself and what he thought about where Scientology's going? Golden Age Tech also. Like, what the hell was he thinking? She could give insights that no one else could give. Literally no one else could give. She'd be the closest thing to the affirmations we could get for David Miscavige. Some concept of what goes on in that guy's head for real, because we conjecture endlessly. We have all this behavior and we go, well, it must be this and this and this, right? But she could offer insights that, no one else could. So I think she'd be an invaluable source of information for all those kinds of things. Those are the sequence. That's the sequence in which I would talk to her about stuff and pick her brain. See where it goes. Yeah, that'd be a blast. Talk to Shelly. All right. Young Matador. Hey, Chris, we've seen lots of talk about near empty Church of Scientology orgs like Sunderland here in the UK. If staff are neglecting work or opening hours, how much trouble will they be in from church management? Oh, yeah. Yeah, the hours thing is always the big deal. Okay. Orgs don't close is a foundational rule in Scientology. I mean, I heard it many, many times over the years when I was a staff member. and then, of course, as a Sea Org member. Orgs don't close. Missions close. Field groups close, not orgs. They have their operating hours, and they are open. So any violation of that would be a foundational problem for Scientology, right? Yeah. So they're going to be in a lot of trouble if they start closing the orgs during the hours they're supposed to be open. Day hours or foundation hours, right? Nights and weekends. Yeah, there's just going to be all kinds of trouble. If management heard that an org was closed, let's say 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Somebody tried to get in and the place was locked and it stayed locked, like nobody was there. Oh my God, this would be mission time, right? Like a Sea Org mission would show up to deal with this. It would be that level of problem for an org to be closed. They just don't allow that kind of thing. And at the moment that they do start allowing that kind of thing, that's the moment I'm waiting for. Because that's the moment where the orgs visibly start dwindling the same way the missions and the field groups have. You know, because of course there was a time when it was inconceivable for a mission to not be open during business hours. I mean, the mission I grew up in, Pasadena mission, was open as a regular business, nights, weekends, all day, every day, just like an org was. And there were plenty of staff, and there was plenty of money, and things were happening, right? And it was a hopping place. People were coming in and out all the time. Now missions are barely open at all. They're part-time operations in people's garages and living rooms for the most part. So that's what eventually is going to happen to the Scientology orgs, the churches. And so when they start closing in the afternoons or closing nights and weekends or whatever, having odd, irregular hours, that is going to be your big flag that the day of the orgs is over and it's on its way out, and they will be pulling in their flippers to the Sea Org orgs. Right? It's going to take years for this to happen, I believe, but I do believe it's going to happen. All right, Ms. Tara Green. I think you don't have the credentials. This is the same as you don't have the fucking rank to ask about Tom Cruise. Exactly. In other words, a gatekeeping, thought-stopping cliche. What do you think? I think it's exactly right. I believe that people who say stuff like that, especially to people like me, right? Like in comments and stuff. I mean, I'm not going to get all like harpy about trolls. It's just funny to me because it's an avenue, it's a way of attacking somebody by nullifying what they're saying so that the person who's saying that obviously is struggling with the message, right? Like, okay, you know, Chris Shelton is talking about Christian evangelicals and MAGA. Oh man, this guy has no qualifications to be talking about that. Right? Shut him down. What does that do? Well, for that person, it nullifies my messaging, right? It nullifies my opinions because they don't like my opinions. They don't like my beliefs. They don't like what we have to say here. And so they have to nullify it somehow. And that's a great way to do it if you're, you know, of a mind that only certain people are qualified to talk about certain topics. And that's why I addressed it the way that I did today, because when it comes to the public square and the marketplace of ideas, we are all qualified to have opinions and ideas about that because it affects all of us. You know, it's not a quantum physics lecture that affects a very, very small number of people who understand quantum physics at a level I will never, ever, ever be able to grasp. Right? That's not the kind of thing we're talking about when we're talking about politics or ideology or religion. These are much, much, much grander topics that are much, much, much more subjective in nature and are not hard sciences that you have to be qualified to discuss at a high post-grad level, you know? So yes, I believe it is nothing but basically a logical fallacy. Xian, did you ever sign an NDA in Scientology? Yes, I did a few times. I signed NDAs when I worked at Bridge Publications, and I signed an NDA for, I think, some project I went on one time, maybe. Can't remember for sure. And then I signed an NDA when I left the church. And I think they paid me like, $50 or something. I mean, it was non-legit NDA. It would never hold up in court. So, yeah, but I did. Xian, is talking to yourself a positive habit? Do you do it? I do. Why? Okay. I don't know, as I sit here, whether talking to yourself, having conversations with yourself, either verbally or just in your mind, right? Hearing the words or conceptualizing the back and forth of this. I don't know whether that's considered wrong or not, or, is there something wrong with you if you do that? But I don't think so, because a number of human beings do it. And I think that it could be considered a form of dissociation if it were to go into full-blown, I'm believing that I'm having a conversation with another entity that isn't me, right, in my head. I think that's where you could start running into trouble. But I think the way we talk to ourselves is sort of a product of the way other people talk to us. And so we sort of take on these feedback loops in our mind and play them back to ourselves. And that can be in another person's voice, because they have told us the same thing over and over again, right? And then we can have conversations. And I think those conversations perhaps are efforts also for us to fill needs, because we can't have or didn't have or won't have the actual real world conversation. So we play it theoretically in our minds over and over, this scenario, that scenario. So I think in a way, maybe it's a way of working out either past mistakes or problems or issues we've had, or it's a way of role playing to yourself future scenarios or arguments that you're going to have, and trying to play them out and predict what's this person going to say, right? And you argue it out in your mind, right? And sometimes we're not aware that we're doing that. We're just talking to ourselves. But we are functionally trying to accomplish something, but we're not really necessarily thinking that way, right? Or aware of the fact that that's what we're doing. So we can catch ourselves out and then go, what am I doing? I'm talking to myself. Only crazy. And then we hear some voice. And that's voice number 3 comes in. Only crazy people talk to themselves. Oh, maybe I'm crazy. Rah, rah, rah. I don't think there's any problem at all with anything like that. I think it's a perfectly normal activity. I'm fascinated, by the way. And in fact, my wife just yesterday was talking about this, because she just cannot get her head around it. And I struggle to get my head around it, that there are people who have no inner monologue at all. None. There's no voices in their head. They don't read and hear the words as they're reading. They don't think about things and hear words or have any conversation with themselves. It's conceptual, or it's at a thought level rather than a word level, even though thoughts in your mind are words in your mind are thoughts too. I mean, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to say that class of thought doesn't exist. And I don't understand that. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because it seems to be some kind of a I don't know. It could not be. I don't think it could be that it would be a specific barrier or somehow some brains just ban speech going on in them. I think it's a different mode of thinking or something, if anything. And I think there's so much more study needed on that to figure that out, because I think it's a question that really does beg an answer. Like, why? Why do some people not have an inner monologue? Or at least they'll tell you that's their experience of life, And that trips me out more than not having, than having voices in the head, because I've had voices in my head my whole life, right? So it's weird. And I believe that people who don't have an inner monologue think it's just as weird that, so many people do. Okay, Mark Turner. March 3rd is the next trial date for ASL. He could get 1 year in jail. Do you have an opinion on if time served is adequate, or should he serve more time? Okay. I'm going to answer this in a broad sense rather than talk about Aaron Smith Levin specifically. Well, I'll give a little specifics because it's necessary to the point I guess I want to make. My limited following of Aaron's jail situation, the hearings, what was said, I don't follow his channel or watch his videos. So that's why I say my limited knowledge of this indicates to me a lack of remorse or sense of responsibility for any wrongdoing, right? I don't believe that Aaron believes that he's done anything wrong. And I think he thinks the whole thing is kind of a joke. More time served isn't the kind of thing that's going to address that, right? Locking somebody up and sequestering them away from society so that they can contemplate the error of their ways certainly is a useful way to get some people to reconsider their actions and their position and maybe reassess their future behavior, right? In an ideal world, everybody who goes to jail or prison would have that sort of, reconciliation with themselves and realization that they've been, that maybe they had something to do with why they're in the place that they're in, and maybe they should, rethink things. Obviously, not everybody who goes to prison does that. Or demonstrates that they've done that, right? Maybe they think about it, but then they think about it in terms of how wronged they were by the system, by other people, by their family, by their friends, by life. They just got done dirty. And sure enough, a lot of people do get done dirty. Life is not a just thing. But prison is for people who have overtly jail, right? Jail time. And I know prison and jail are two different things. So Aaron's been in jail, not prison. But in many ways, jail can be worse than prison in terms of the conditions and the general situation. So for people who don't have that, I can look at Aaron's situation and go, a series of actions were taken by him that were probably not well advised, probably not a good idea when it came to protesting. And he ended up where he ended up. It was a self-inflicted wound, in other words, right? Nobody forced him, or circumstances didn't force him to do what he did to end up where he is, or where the situation that he's in. So more time in jail, I don't think, is going to change that mind. So that's why I would say probably a waste of everybody's time and taxpayer money to do that. What he needs is something different than that if he's going to change and become a more socially acceptable person. It would need to, something else would need to be done, right? So, and I think that's true for a lot of people who are in jail right now. We do not do right by that section of our society. The down and outs, the criminals, the people that we have to sequester away for whatever reason. And there's a lot of reasons. There's a laundry list of laws, right? Of reasons we throw people in the slammer. And forget about them. Effectively forget about them. We throw them into basically what are labor camps. In many, many, many states in this country, prisons are labor camps. And it's a sort of constitutionally approved version of modern slavery to a degree. You could look at it through that lens, and many, many people have. It is an arguable way to describe our modern prison system. I have disagreements personally with that concept of that's how you deal with people that you've sequestered away from society, right? I think there are, in modern society, it hasn't always been this way, but I do believe now we're in a place where we can be more humane and we can make better choices about how we deal with those folks than we do. We have way, 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 way too many people in prison. Way too many. They do not all belong there. And there are ways of organizing this and dealing with this that are far more rational than what we do. But I'm not in charge of that. Nobody's asking me about it. Nobody's calling me saying, hey, Chris, what do you think we should do to reform the prison system, right? So whatever. But it's true. It's just a fact, right? And the product speaks for itself as to its effectiveness. Right? The prison system is when it comes to rehabilitation, come on, you know. So I wanted to speak to that bigger picture much, much, much more so than I wanted to speak about Aaron, you know. His situation is really ultimately incredibly stupid. It's an incredibly stupid situation because it is a completely self-inflicted wound that is wholly unnecessary and doesn't do anything, and I mean does nothing, to help the cause of fighting Scientology. None of that is useful or helpful in any way to what we're trying to accomplish. So there we go. All right, let's see here. Oh, Mitch. Oh, Mitch. I don't think Shelly's answers would be totally useless now. Come on. But anyway, that's fine. You can believe that if you want, I suppose. I've talked to enough people in cults that I think there is very usable and very useful information you can draw out of them, just not the information they think they're giving you. You know, you got to kind of, work around it a little bit, but you can get very useful information out of people who are in destructive cult situations. And of course, there's no way you could ever get somebody out if you can't get in touch with them and communicate with them and really try to achieve some breakthrough moments. You can't get there if you don't talk to them. All right. Let's see here. Gary Palmer asks, okay, unfortunately, a friend decided to try a S course to learn to study, Scientology, right, to study. And he said this course, Student Hat, is crazy, and there is an exam at the end, and he is freaking out. Can you tell us about the exam? Well, I can't tell you about the exam now because I don't know what the exam is now. At the time I was in Scientology, there were about 2 or 3 different changes to the exam process for finishing a course like the Student Hat. So it's a changing thing. It's not always the same. But generally speaking, format-wise, it usually is a written exam. I believe the answers are essay form, not multiple choice. And you are asked to basically regurgitate or explain many of the facets of study tech, like what are the 3 barriers to study and what are the physical manifestations of them. And if you can't say that a misunderstood word causes a blankness, confusion, a sort of, not understanding what's going on, and the phenomena of blow will occur because of a misunderstood word, and then differentiate that from a lack of mass in study, which has another set of physiological phenomena that goes along with it, such as your eyes might hurt, your stomach feels funny, you're going to feel maybe a little dizzy from time to time. You're going to have these other kind of manifestations occurring. And if you can't differentiate that from your skipped gradient, which is a confusion or a reelingness that kind of goes along with that, right? Those are the kind of answers you're expected to give in this exam. You might be asked about the 10 different versions or forms of a misunderstood word. What are they? What are the 10 different kinds of ways a word can be misunderstood? And there are 10 different kinds, right? There's the homonymic versus the synonymous versus the wholly, completely not understood at all, no definition, right? There's all these different ways, right? You can have a partial definition, you can have an incorrect definition. It's the right definition, but a wrong context, right? So there's 10 different ways Hubbard says you can misunderstand a word, and pretty sure you're going to need to regurgitate all of those during the exam on the student hat. Stuff like that, right? That's what you're going to have to know. And I don't know what else I can tell you about it. You have to get 85. If I remember right, it was 85% is passing. So you can lose. But no matter if you get anything wrong, if it's above 85%, you'll pass, but they'll give you a little correction. And if it's below 85%, you're going to get what's called a retread order. And you're going to have to go back to the course room and do your restudy of that, and then go do the exam again, right? You'll do a retread. And a retread is just basically the things that you missed on, because you missed on so much that you didn't pass. And so we're going to have to run you through the grinder here and get it so that you have 100%, preferably it's 100% on your exam. That's just about everything I could tell you about that I can remember right now. So hope that helps. No, this is CS 102. What know predators, what victims doesn't know? Okay, what are you asking me? What know predators, what victims doesn't know? I have absolutely no idea what you are asking me. I'm sorry, but I don't understand that question. I'm going to have to ask you to rephrase that, CS. I cannot make sense of that question. Okay. Yeah, Gary, you could write me as well. Maybe we could have a little back and forth on where this person's at. If you're trying to get them to leave Scientology, maybe I can give you some advice in that direction. Yeah. Okay. X-Scion here. Have you ever wished that you were in Scientology during the early days as opposed to when you actually were? Oh. God, you guys asked some good questions. That's an interesting one. I don't have any time period of Scientology which I would have preferred to have been in. Each decade or phase of Scientology's growth was its own version of awful. Just different shades of it, right? I think it got progressively worse and worse over the years, and I think the 50s would have been a freer or more expressive or wilder, less structured time. And I think that the 50s would have been a more interesting experience, a more free-flowing and freely communicating version of Dianetics and Scientology. In other words, people were still free to contribute to the subject out of their own thinking. Keeping Scientology working wasn't a concept yet. Hubbard tried to, keep control of it, But people were doing stuff with Dianetics and with Scientology in the 50s that he couldn't control, and he was constantly trying to use certification as the control mechanism to, well, you're not certified, or I'm going to cancel your certifications because I'm the certificate, I'm the authority. I'm the one who puts L. Ron Hubbard name on the certificate saying you're authorized to, you're trained in my work. And so I'm going to deny that, or I'm going to take it away from you after I've given it to you because you're doing things I don't like, or you're a person I don't like, or you said something I don't like, right? Hubbard would do this all the time. And there were newsletters and periodicals in the Scientology world that they would sort of set up and send to each other. There were the California Dianetic Auditors Association, and there was another group in Colorado, and there was another group in Chicago. And you have these newsletters and information things happening in these sort of little organizational kind of things happening with people that Hubbard was not in control of. And he kind of didn't like that a whole lot. So there was a lot of back and forth about that, and people breaking away from Hubbard all the time as a result. It was a wilder time, and Hubbard didn't have all the authority and structure behind him that he built once he got to St. Hill and got this kind of international headquarters. And then, of course, the Sea Org happens, and, all this, and then people in uniforms are showing up and chaining people to their desks and stuff like that. I mean, it just got insane in the 60s when the Sea Org first was around as to what they would do to people and staff members. I mean, it was just wild. So it was different. There's no question about it. It was different. Scientology has gone through phases of its evolution, and 1950 Scientology is vastly different from 1960s Scientology, and it's useful to divide it into decades. It's a useful way of talking about it, because it's true. The 50s was different from the 60s, 70s, 80s. There are all these different phases. And Scientology not only was changing externally to fit with the cultural changes around it, but it was changing internally too, becoming a more structured and organized activity. That's probably the best way to go about putting it, Yeah. I think that's the best way to talk about it. Let's see. I think I would have... See, I wouldn't have wanted to have grown up in Scientology in the 50s, because it would have been even more confusing than it was for me when I was growing up in Scientology in the 70s, But if I could have gotten involved as an adult, as a first-generation person, then I think the 50s would have been a wilder and more interesting time. Than what it became. Hubbard, one of the things you guys don't maybe know is that in the 1950s, Dianetics and Scientology was a lot loosier-goosier because Hubbard was not as strict about step A, step B, step C, right? Like laying out with exact commands, here's how you do process X, and that's different from process Y, and that's different from process Z. He didn't really have it all worked out that exactly in the early days. It was much broader. It was, here is a dead DEDX. Go run it. Here's a theta clear. Here's the formula to get to a theta clear. Here's these 5 steps that need to be done. Go do them. And step 1 could take you 200 fucking hours of auditing, right? I mean, you could just be, and you had to kind of figure it out yourself based on what Hubbard's theory was. He'd tell you all this theory, he'd give you all this information, and it was haphazard at best as to how integrated and logically consistent it all was. But he'd give these lectures. This is 1950, 51, 52, 53. And people would take them and go, okay, well, I guess he means for me to go do this. And they'd go into a session and they'd do it. There were no TRs, no model session. E-meters were these big ass Volney versions, right, that plugged into the wall and would shock people as often as show a floating needle, right? I mean, it was a really crazier time. And so people had a lot more authority as auditors and more imagination and more investment of themselves in the process of helping or auditing their pre-clears. It wasn't so laid out. There's no bridge. There's no series of steps or processes. It's just Hubbard's latest stuff. Here you go. Here's the latest stuff. Go with it. And so that would have been a much wilder experience of Scientology. You know? And it was really only through the 1960s that this stuff started getting locked down a bit more, and Hubbard was lecturing and making little films about the grade chart and putting all that stuff together. That was like 16 years into the subject that he's coming up with a bridge and a route to do it, that he finally finalized, you know? So 50s Scientology would have just been like insane, you know, because it was really roll your own stuff. And also remember, there's no confessionals, there's no sec checks. There were 2 or 3 years in the 1950s when the e-meter wasn't even around. Hubbard was like, yeah, fuck the e-meter, fuck Volney Matheson, we're not doing that anymore. No more e-meters. You know? It's just look at that wall, walk over to that wall, touch that wall, turn around, right? It was like, okay, here we go, 25 hours of woo. Oh my God, right? What a crazy, crazy time that must have been. So, yeah, no ethics officers, you know, no organizations, none of that stuff. No knowledge reports. Yeah, would have been a crazy time. But it wouldn't have been any better for you, you know? It's not like the 1950s was a better version of Scientology. That wouldn't be an accurate way of describing it, right? All right, anyway. Good. Okay, so we're an hour in, and I have run out of questions in the queue here. So if you have any more you want to throw my way, now would be the time. See if anything else comes in here as we do each week. I have no time limits on this show. We have a 2-hour time limit, but I don't have any time thing on this show. It doesn't have to go 2 hours. I'm just here to answer questions y'all have. So if you have anything else for me, throw it my way. I will say that just since I have a moment here, I am setting up some more stuff for future. I've got I'm trying to set up another chat with Jon Atack about the auditor's code. We're in the middle of scheduling that. And let me see here if there we go. There we go. Yep. More questions just came in through the queue. And I will say also that I have, since I mentioned this future stuff, I'm also trying to set up some more XJW content so we can talk about Jehovah's Witnesses a little bit more. We've done such a good job, I think, of talking about the Mormons with Bryce and Shannon. I'm curious if any of you, since this is coming up, actually I've been meaning to ask you guys, are there any other aspects of either the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons, especially for you longtime followers, that we have not covered that you want to hear about? Because I think I've covered just about everything I can think of to talk about when it comes to Mormon structure, finances, belief system, and abuses, and the Mormon missions and the Mormon, you know, setup. I think we've done a pretty good job of that at this point. But you tell me if there's more you want to know or anything that we haven't covered or we need to cover more. Again, Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, throw it my way, email me, let me know, put it in the comments section, but let me know what you want to hear on that, because I do have the possibility or opportunity to set up more talks on those things if you want to hear them, right? So let me know. Oh yeah, we've definitely talked about how Mormons have taken over Utah. Yes, we have commented on that many, many times. Oh, audio was chopping up a little bit. Okay, Yeah, sorry about that. Good. Okay, I'm glad it's back now. Let me wet my whistle, as they say, and I will take on the rest of these questions here. All right. Oh, I should have taken that off the screen while I was sitting there going on at a mad rate. All right. X-Cyan asks, should I be concerned about the repeal of federal regulations on greenhouse gas emissions, or should I just not worry about it because it was a scam by the EPA all along? What can I do about it? Okay, great question. You're going to get my opinion here. I am very far from an educated expert when it comes to environmental protection regulations. My attitude and feelings about this are that, and my experience, my life experience is that energy corporations and companies are as irresponsible as we allow them to be. And they will push every single boundary and will degrade our environment and will dump toxic materials into marshes and wetlands and into any territory they so desire if it's convenient for them to do so, so they can save some money and maximize shareholder profit. Energy companies and corporations and any of these private publicly traded companies exist only for shareholder value. Morals, ethics, regulations, rules, the environment, customers, customer satisfaction, a good product that works well over time and provides a stable service to people. None of those things are relevant. None of them matter. Shareholder profit is the only thing that matters. And if you think I'm wrong about that, I invite you to go talk to a CEO and listen in on any shareholder meeting. And you will see exactly what I'm talking about. They couldn't give a fuck about you. It's all about shareholder profit. And if they destroy the environment in the process, they are more than happy to do so as long as they get this quarter's profits up. All right, so is the EPA, was it created so as to be a burden on these companies, to unfairly regulate them, to somehow put false arbitrary standards there that companies have to follow and comply with and jump through all these hoops and pay all this money because the EPA is just a government conspiracy op to make their lives difficult? No, I don't believe that that's the case at all. I believe that every one of those bullshit lines comes out of those same companies that are willing to destroy our environment and destroy our future world and destroy the future of our children so that they can make shareholder profit, right? It's really, that's the moral computation of C-suite executives in any company, anywhere in the world these days, especially in the United States. So yes, you should be very concerned about the repealing of these regulations about greenhouse gases. Yes, you should be concerned about that, and your children should be concerned about it, and their yet unborn children should be concerned about it because they're the ones whose lives are going to be so dramatically affected by it. And because of that fact, people now, especially boomers, couldn't care less. They don't care about future generations. That much is very obvious in their behavior. Right? Super obvious. Intention is something that is manifested through action, not words. You cannot believe what people say, you believe what they do. And what companies and corporations having to do with environmental regulations, like gas companies, power companies, oil companies, right, car companies, is they cheat and skirt and lie and cheat some more. We have decades and decades of on record, in court experience with this. This isn't my opinion. So these regulations were created by our government so as to create a future environment that would be safe and secure for future generations. That's the job of government. That should be the thinking of responsible corporations, but it is not, because we do not live in an era or age of responsible corporations. We live in an era of shareholder profit. And I really am just going to drive that home again and again and again, because one, that's how I see it, and two, because that's how it fucking is. You know, it just is. So there you go. All right, Lutz. The question probably should be, what do predators know that victims don't that allows the predators to exploit the victims? Yeah, probably something like that. I'll answer that question, of course. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that make up an answer to this question. So I don't want to blow everybody away here or go, too broad. I guess it depends a little bit on what you're looking at. Okay, for example, one of the things that the predator knows that the victim doesn't know is that the victim has emotional needs that are unfulfilled that the predator is promising to fulfill, and has no intention whatsoever of actually fulfilling those promises. So the predator knows what the victim's weaknesses are, and the victim doesn't necessarily know that, or isn't as aware of the weakness as they should be. This is why I harp on this stuff all the time, is not because I'm trying to make out that you're just a bunch of weak idiots out there, because you're not at all. But we have weaknesses. Every one of us does. And we have our blind spots. We have huge, huge blind spots. All of us do, in how we see ourselves and how we behave. We want X, and we can get so tunnel vision on X that we tune out the other things that we should be aware of, right? Here comes Predator A, and he's got all these promises about how he's going to give us X, and we're so hyper-focused on X, we don't see the red flags. That this predator has had broken relationships or burns bridges, or, people, is not a savory character, right? It's kind of an unsavory character. But we can tune all that out if we're so fixed on what we're fixed on. And that's what predators know about people, is that that's how they are, and that's how they get. And that's how we can take it. That's how the predator can take advantage of them. So that's a thing that predators know that victims don't. Right, is the weakness that the victim is demonstrating or manifesting, and how to take advantage of it. The solution, of course, is not to not have weaknesses, because we can't, there's no such person, right? Everybody has weaknesses, but it's being aware of the fact you have them. It's being aware of the fact that you're willing to acknowledge that you have them. It's having a little fucking humility, right? And a little humbleness, and a little bit of like, oh, I don't know all these things, and somebody could come along and take advantage of me, and I should factor that into how I think about dealing with people. If you were going to go into business with somebody that you had just met, you would want to do what's called your due diligence, right? You'd want to check things out. But in the moment of a predator preying, they convince the person not to do their due diligence, not to check things out, not to pay attention to those red flags. That's what the predator has over the victim, is the ability, the skill set to push a person through emotion and through moral pressures to go in a direction they shouldn't be going in. So that's what the predator knows that the victim kind of doesn't know. That's an answer to the question that I could think of right now. There are also, of course, other ways we could answer this. The predator knows and has a skill set around emotional and manipulation. Probably has, knowledge in that direction, dark psychology knowledge, knowledge about neurolinguistic programming and manipulative techniques and tactics, ways you can talk to people, negotiation skills, right? Ways to get people to avoid the word no, ways to get to people to avoid the word yes, right? You can read Chris Voss's stuff. You can bring all kinds of things into this that a predator might know that a victim isn't aware, they're being manipulated. But I would say at the end of the day, the most useful thing that I could give to you that would answer this question is the victim doesn't understand three simple things. That coercive control is isolation, manipulation, and control, right? It doesn't go straight to control. It starts with isolation and manipulation, and that's where you get the control coming from. And that's how it happens long term. That's how you get repeating patterns of control, is you isolate, manipulate, and control. So if victims even knew that much, they could be so much more self-aware of their circumstances and themselves to not be victimized by predators, right? Okay. It's just those basics. We keep circling back around to those basics because they are the things that really could save your life in the moment. It's that important, or it could save years of your life, wasting decades because of some fucked up bad decision that you make. And you look back and go, man, I really wish I had known that I was being isolated and manipulated and controlled, in that moment when I had signed that staff contract or done that thing, right? You can look back years later, or you can have a little advanced knowledge by being a little bit more situationally aware of what's going on around you when it's happening, right? It's tough. It's tough. Nobody ever said this was easy, but all right. Loots. Movies. I love movie questions. Are you hyped for the Disclosure Day and Project Hail Mary movies and their exploration of existential themes? You bet I am. I'm very curious, and I have avoided spoilers so far if there are out there on Disclosure Day. I'm very interested in where that's going. Very curious about that one. Of course, I love Spielberg. I like Emily Blunt as an actress, as the lead. We'll see where it goes. Project Hail Mary, I'm less interested in, but I will see it. I love Ryan Gosling. I like the writer Weir, the guy who wrote it, right? Same guy who wrote Martin Weir, I think his name is, the same guy who wrote The Martian. And of course, the same guy who wrote The Egg, by the way. If you thought The Martian was good and you want to talk about existential stuff, go look up The Egg. It's a one-page story by the same guy, and it is so good. Anyway, yes, I am very, very much looking forward to those. Now, don't have a lot else to say about them right now. John O'Nolan, I find Jon Atack hard to follow. Okay. I usually need to listen twice. Sure. Are there others with the same issue? I've heard people express that Jon can be, has a lot of references and cites a lot of works. And I think that seems to be the thing that throws people off a little bit when they are listening to him is he does, like me, he has a lot to say in a short amount of time. So there is a lot of data dumping there. And I do the exact same thing. But I know he references and cites works far more often than I do. And I think that impresses people, but throws them off a little bit, makes it a little hard to follow. I don't have any other, as I sit here, I'm not criticizing him. I'm commenting on how he talks about things, in a similar way to how I do. I think that's why we've done probably 30-something podcasts together, him and me. I don't know that I've worked with somebody as much as I have with him. And over that time, I will say that Jon initially intimidated me as an interviewer and as an ex-Scientologist because of his breadth of knowledge. And over time, as I have learned and grown and also talked with him over and over and over and over and over again, I got a little bit more used to how he talks and thinks. And and fully understand what he's talking about when he and I are talking. I don't, generally speaking, fall behind or get stuck on something he's saying like I used to. So I do understand what you're saying, but I guess through time I don't know, understand him better. So I don't know. Not sure what else to say to that. You know, not everybody is everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody needs to be. Is what it is, you know? All right, Anonymous. The complex Sea Org houses, married and single Scientologists and their families. I don't know what this question is. In Los Angeles, in the complex, the PAC base has been referred to as the complex. So at the complex, you have dorm style living with Sea Org members, where male, female dorms, and you have couples rooms where people get married, and when they get married, they get assigned a room, and that's their permanent space to live in, their domicile. Their families don't live with them. People don't have families in the Sea Org. They're couples. You don't have kids and stuff like that living together in the Sea Org. So that's what threw me off a little bit, I think. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Mespilism. Thanks for letting us all know that Mespilism is not a cult. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, Gary Palmer asks, did you meet Catherine Bell? She is gay and a Scientologist, and her wife too. I did not, but I am well aware of who you're talking about. She's an actress. She was on JAG. She's been in a bunch of stuff. And she's gay. You're absolutely right. And she is still a Scientologist, and she's a celebrity, and celebrities get to break all the rules. And I really don't know a whole lot else more about her than that. But yeah, she is. OBG Foster, do you have a favorite author? That's a tough one. I have a number of authors that I really like, but I don't know that I have a favorite. I don't think I have a favorite. I have a list of, if I was going to like start listing out like top authors, it would have names on the list like Mark Twain, Carl Sagan, Steinbeck, right? Hemingway, Shakespeare, people whose words have not just moved me, but have moved societies, you know? Important authors, people whose words matter. And every one of the people I just listed, you know, I mean, Shakespeare introduced over 1,000 phrases and new words and ideas into the English language. You can argue how many specifically. There's many people who have compiled those lists, but the fact that he did that and the fact that it's well over 1,000 is pretty indisputable. The man was unbelievable, you know. I've mentioned before, you know, some of the phrasing, some of the I don't think it's wrong for me to think of myself as a wordsmith. I think that's something I get to say about myself as a writer, as I have, you know, this concept of a wordsmith, meaning that there's a forge and an anvil, and you're just pounding, you know, you're pounding out the words. It doesn't just always flow. Sometimes it's work, you know, to get the right words, and I'm not great at it. But I do the work of it. These guys are great at it, the best at it, that I've seen or been exposed to. I've not read Dostoevsky. I've not read Tolstoy. I haven't read all the greats and all the classics. So I can't speak or go into detail about classic Russian literature or even, translated works. I haven't read widely of Confucius or, even whatever is supposedly in written down from Buddha or, in the Hindu texts or whatnot. So I can't speak broadly about all human literature too much. I can only speak to what I've been exposed to. And, Stephen King's a great writer, but he's not but it's not literature, right? It's really good storytelling. When I think about somebody like Hemingway, or especially Steinbeck, something like The Pearl, right? Or I think about Of Mice and Men. And I think, I just think greatness. I think these stories are so inspired, are so incredible. So those are the authors that I put on a pedestal and look up to, is their ability to communicate, their ability to understand the human condition and communicate it, the highs, the lows, the tragedies, the absurdity. Really comes through a lot in Steinbeck's work, and so simple. There is no one who writes more simply and yet more powerfully, right? But then you get phrases, like Shakespearean biblical stuff, something wicked this way comes, I just love stuff like that, so that's the kind of thing that gets me going, as an author, or in authors. I don't know if that's whatever, but it is. Jacob Harkley. Hi, Chris. Will you be in New London in September for Howdycon? I plan on it. Yes, I absolutely do. I think I'll be speaking. I will definitely be going. No question. You'll see me there. Yeah. And I mean, unless something comes up that absolutely positively, makes it impossible for me to go, I'm planning on being there. Okay. Exion asks, maybe it would be a good idea to have the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights written on the gold plates, you fucker, and placed in titanium containers, buried in a mountain for future generations. Yeah, maybe it would be a good idea. Oh, man. All right, Anonymous, have you interviewed someone from the Moonies or Hare Krishnas? Only Steve Hassan. I spoke with Steve Hassan, interviewed him about his life experiences and stuff, but otherwise, no. Not. Oh, wait. Did I? No. No. Yes. No, hang on. Jen Kiaba. Yeah, I interviewed her too. I believe she was part of that. Yeah, I have. And I could certainly do more of that. No question about that. So, but you can find a couple interviews on my channel with former Moonies. Okay. Good. We'll see if the queue, let me just hit the little button here and see if this, there we go, a couple more. Okay, apparently if I hit the scroll bar, that updates the queue a little bit. All right. Oh, Margaret is saying here that Mespilism is a cult. Oh, well, if that's true and if you're serious, please email me at askchrisshelton@gmail.com with what it is you know about Mespilism that makes it a cult, because I can't find anything except a single website about it, and there's not a lot there. So I'd love to know more about what Mespilism is. John O'Nolan, can you describe what it looks like inside the Scientology Twin Cities building? It's beautiful, and it is a fishbowl. There's a lot of glass walls, so you can see everything. It's very, very transparent in there. It's a 2-story building, so there's 2 big, huge stories. It's very large. And big, wide open spaces in the front. It's just a beautiful building. And all the course room spaces are divided in the back. There's a Div 6, all the Division 6 public courses are on the first floor. And I think the academy stuff and the advanced course stuff is not advanced course, but the academy level stuff. I believe that's up on the second floor. That's where the auditing rooms are. And they got like 25 auditing rooms or something, 20 or 25. I mean, just a shitload of rooms up there for auditing to be happening. And then they have the main academy, and across the hall there's an upper Indoc TR's course room. I think there's another few course rooms. I think they have like 9 course rooms upstairs and something like 9 or 10 rooms downstairs. They can hold, if I remember right, something on the order of 500 or 600 people could be in that building at any one time doing classwork. If you had all the chairs filled, like it's a lot of space in that building. Purif is up on the second floor. They have a whole sauna facility up there. Very, very beautiful, nice tiled space, showers in the back, treadmills, bunch of pro, running treadmills and stuff in there in that space. It's transparent and empty. Yeah, I mean, it really is. There are maybe 9 or 10 staff members there at a time. It's they're swimming around. It's very much a goldfish bowl. I don't know what they were thinking getting that building, because Scientology has never been a huge thing in Twin Cities. The biggest thing Twin Cities ever did in all the years that they were a Scientology church were some pretty big Dianetics seminars that were held in the 1980s. I think, in fact, they might have had the claim to fame of the largest Dianetics seminar ever held in the U.S. They certainly had a really, really big one. They had like hundreds of people show up. Got like 2 or 3 turnovers of people who became Scientologists from that. Twin Cities has always been a pretty pathetic place for Scientology. So what they were thinking, getting a 90,000 square foot building, they're never going to fill that building up. It's just so silly. Such a fantastic waste of time and money. All right. Good. So I think we've reached the end of our question queue. Again, I will say right now, if you have any more questions for me, throw them in the queue now. I am going to throw at you, since we have this space and I am thinking about it. Don't want to forget. Thou shalt not suffer cognitive biases. Let's take a look at a random cognitive bias this week that we can learn from. Groupthink. Your bias is groupthink. You let the social dynamics of a group situation override the best outcomes. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We're doing this one. Dissent can be uncomfortable, and so often the most confident or first voice will determine group decisions. Try to facilitate objective means of evaluation and critical thinking practices as a group activity. Try. Do your best. Let me know how that goes. All right. Oh, man. Yeah, if Mespilism's a cult, you just got to let me know why. I don't even know what it is. All I've seen of Mespilism is a web page that looks like, or a booklet of some kind that looks harmless enough. So if there's actually a group and a leader or some kind of charismatic leadership and a dogmatic belief system, I really want to know about it, because I can't find anything online about this. And that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There are plenty in this world that has no online parallel or mirror to it. So that's why I'm asking if you know about it, Margaret. Definitely, this is an old question on this show. So I definitely want to know more about it if you can tell me. Just email me. Again, the email to ask me questions for this show or get in touch with me, askchrisshelton@gmail.com. I'm maintaining that Gmail account and address, but it forwards to my regular Proton mail now. So I will get those messages, but I'm just keeping it up as that same Gmail address because it's always been askchrisshelton@gmail.com. So I don't see any reason to change that now. All right. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show for today. Thanks very much for coming around and listening to me blabber on at a mad rate on my little soapbox. I love it. I love the fact that I get to do this. So I will talk to you guys soon. I will definitely, in fact, this week, I'm going to promise you one of these 2 reaction videos is going to happen. We're either going to do the Grant Cardone one and or the Sarge Fouth one. I would prefer to do that one, but let's see. One or the other is going to happen this week in addition to the other stuff I do. No reason we can't pop something out this week on that, so let's do it. All right, folks, I will be seeing you all later. Thank you for your support. I will end the show with an ask. If you can, I could really, really, really use your support. If this channel and this show and this work that I do is something that is of assistance to you or help to you, signing up on Patreon or, you know, throwing some love my way would be awesome. It would be very, very helpful. And I don't say this enough. So if you would like one-on-one consultation with me for anything having to do with coercion or post-cult recovery, or you have a friend or a family member and you don't know what to do or say to deal with them and they're in some extreme headspace or belief system or something, you can reach out to me and we can talk. I have an hourly rate and I'm well worth the time. And I've helped a lot of people over the years with these kind of situations, and I am more than willing to help you too. So you can reach out to me at this channel. I have put a website together now. It is bare bones. It is absolutely like it's 2 pages right now, but it is active. You can reach out to me at chrissheltonmsc.org. That is my website. I will throw a link to it in the description sections. And there is a contact form on there if you want to reach out to me. It's, like I said, it's a sparse website right now, but at least it's something and it is online and active. So chrissheltonmsc.org. Reach out to me if you want. All right, guys, I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.